A word to the wise. This episode contains spoilers for the entire Half-Life franchise. Listener discretion is advised. On this week's episode of Electronic Fun, I'm joined by ArthriticJester to dive deep into Valve's wildly influential Half-Life and the massive legacy it has left behind. So please, join me. Let's have some fun. Craig, you humorous little fellow.
He's a kooky little character.
He is. You know, we've had a lot of we had some troubles with him in the past recording Spidey Signals, but you know he's been a stalwart pal, especially now that he's mellowed out a little bit. But yeah, welcome back to Electronic Fun. This episode we've got my good friend Alex here, otherwise known as ArthriticJester. How you doing, Alex?
And I'm Alex. Ah, fuck, wrong show. I'm doing good. I just got home from a long shift at my job, and I'm ready to talk about video games.
It's gonna be interesting. Did you play through the game at all to like get your mind ready for this?
About halfway, yeah. I got maybe a third to halfway done in the week I've been playing it. I've been playing on the hardest difficulty and in my free time, which is exceedingly diminishing the more projects I tack onto myself. But I played enough of it to refresh myself, yeah.
That's all you really need for this. But yeah, this week we're talking about the hit video game Half-Life, released in the year of our Lord 1998, which was an astoundingly productive year for games. A lot of really great games came out that year.
Mm-hmm.
Resident Evil 2, bunch of shit came out that
year. Did Ocarina come out in 98?
Ocarina came out in 98. Metal Gear Solid came out in 98. I keep forgetting.
Ooh.
Banjo-Kazooie, Parasite Eve, the first StarCraft, Marvel vs. Capcom.
1998 for games was like what 1994 was for music.
Yeah, it's like there's a couple. I've been interested in this idea of landmark years in games. There's like 98. 2007 was definitely one.
The very next one I thought of, yeah.
2013 I feel like was a big one as well. But there was a lot going on specifically in 98 and 97 as well to a lesser extent, because that was that was Symphony of the Night, that was Final Fantasy 7.
A lot of people throw the word revolutionary around when you talk about games, like really, really loosely. But no, it's really safe to say 98 was a revolutionary year for 3D in general with games. Games, of course, like all kinds of games, but really 3D is what really started to look less shitty in 98.
The late 90s really were just a hotbed of really revolutionary games. Especially
like this one.
Like Half-Life. Let's open up with the classic question I'm going to ask of all of my guests. Who are you? How would you sort of describe yourself, Alex?
A lot of people default to content creator, but I don't really create much content, to be honest with you.
Jackson said he was a niche internet micro celebrity.
Yeah, I guess that's fair, but even more niche, I guess. You got to be really into Spider-Man if you've heard of old ArthriticJester. No, I by day I work in custom framing. I make picture frames for people that bring me their shit. I play a lot of games. I'm a musician. I'm in a band with a couple buddies of mine that live a couple towns away from me, so we don't practice too often. But we're working on having some kind of EP ready this year. Last year, my big focus was the Spider-Man podcast. This year, I want to actually make some actual goddamn music. Well, we make plenty of it. We just don't put it out there. But I'm a musician. I'm a framer. I'm an internet man. I have terminal internet poisoning in my brain. I play games, and I exist. I do a lot of stuff.
And obviously, you know, if you're listening to this, you probably also at least a little bit listened to Spidey Signals, the podcast that Alex is on with me, where we talk about Spider-Man. Very, very successful, very famous, greatest podcast in the world.
Yeah. Spotify
Exactly.
just offered to buy us for $101 million.
For 100, yeah, fuck you, Joe Rogan. Now we're just gonna start like doing weird right wing shit on the podcast.
Oh yeah, buy the Spidey Signals Electro Fun Pod NFT coming out next week.
Exactly. We got NFTs. We got supplements. We got the whole nine. We're selling you gas station dick pills. The
Lex,
whole
pull up that
nine
monkey
yards.
video.
Hey, oh
Pull up that
yeah.
monkey
All right.
video.
I'm pulling it up. Wow. Uh. All right. Where did your sort of going back on topic? Where did your sort of relationship with games begin? Did you have a lot of games when you were a kid? Did you not start playing when
Yeah,
you were
that's
older?
that's fair to say. Yeah, I was born in '96, so I grew up in a really good time for video games. The earliest gaming memories I have, I was visiting a cousin in Tennessee. Well, rather, we were at my cousin's house. The cousin was at a dance camp, a ballet camp, but I had her bedroom, and she had an N64. And my two earliest memories of playing games are Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time at age 3, and not being able to figure out how to leave Kokiri Forest, and Shadows of the Empire, also for N64. And every time I died, you get that like, I don't remember if it's Emperor Palpatine or Prince Shizor, but you get this like really grim looking face that comes up at the game over screen, and it scared the piss out of me at 3. But I ended up growing to love both of those games. But shortly after that, 2000-ish, my dad got a Dell Inspiron laptop solely because he could play Quake 3 Arena on it anywhere. You could take it
Fuck
fucking
yeah.
anywhere, and you could play Quake 3 Arena on it, and that is the real first game I played was Quake 3. Fucking loved it, still love it, still play it to this day with my brother and other people. I fucking love that game so much, and that was really the gateway for me. 2001 Christmas time, I got an Xbox, and it's all been downhill since then. There was a point in high school where I had collected all of the American Nintendo consoles, I should say, up to the GameCube. I had a physical copy of every Zelda up to Wind Waker. I used to be really into the retro stuff, but that kind of tapered off in college. These days, I play a lot of stuff on Steam, a lot of Xbox stuff still. I've got Game Pass, and that does me a lot of favors. I'm working on eventually getting the funds together to build a big boy PC, but that's my brief history of gaming.
I'm always been a pre-built guy. I try
Oh yeah,
to
nothing
fiddle
wrong with
around
that.
try to fiddle around with building your own shit. It's like, especially nowadays when bullshit crypto
Mhm.
nonsense is making graphics card prices really expensive.
I'm actually quite lucky in that regard because my brother used to work at a big box office retail store. And anytime that a component would go on sale, he would buy that component and put it in his computer. So he's got like a box of parts at home labeled like for Alex's PC. So I've
Awesome.
got I've got a lot of stuff, at my fingertips I can just slap into whatever I start
Uh,
soon-ish. TBD.
That's great. Now,
Absolutely.
as we said earlier, we're talking about Half Life.
Mhm.
So, what is Half Life? Give us sort of cliff notes. What is this game? What is it about?
TLDR, it's the worst day on the job a human being has ever had.
Very bad.
Expanding just a bit, you are Gordon Freeman. You don't know much about yourself when you start the game, but you are a 27-year-old MIT graduate, which just makes my skin crawl the older I get. I'm going to be 26 in less than a month, and I'm like, oh no, I'm as old as Gordon Freeman. Um,
Gordon Freeman.
you attempt an experiment that they haven't clued you in much about. You're essentially ramming crystal A into energy field B, and that kind of opens this interdimensional rift that starts pouring alien foot soldiers into your place of work, which is this cavernous underground science research hush hush facility. As time goes on, you attempt to fight your way out and through to get back to the surface until you run into US military HECU soldiers that are there to, you think, rescue you. But as you find out, they're there to murder and suppress everything and carpet bomb the place and sweep it all under the rug. Eventually, you have to venture into the alien dimension of Zen itself to take down the Nihilith, which is essentially the one running all of these alien soldiers into your dimension. Uh, all unbeknownst to you until the end, that's actually like a vetting process to sell you to the highest bidder as like an alien, I don't maybe know the right word for this. Like you're like like an operative, a
Yeah,
contractor.
you're basically a contractor or a problem solver.
Exactly. Yeah, you get essentially drafted against your will to become like, okay, well, we're gonna freeze you for a while until we need you again, Master Chief. But that's the short story of Half-Life. You're trying to claw your way out of just a hellish day gone wrong at your big boy job. Uh, it's great. It's a landmark game.
It's a landmark game. It's a first-person shooter. It's built on the Quake engine. Well, it's a modified version of the Quake engine, the Gold Source engine, which would become the Source engine. So we're going to talk a little bit more about this game's connection to earlier to Quake specifically later.
Mhm.
What was your sort of first experience with this game? Where were you sort of in your life at that time?
Well, you kinda have to reverse engineer that. I am one of the I'd wager there's a lot of people out there that played Half-Life 2 first. 2007-ish, I got the orange box for Xbox, and it advertised itself as the greatest gaming value of all time, and I still think that might be true. Uh, Played the ever-loving hell out of Half-Life 2 and its both episodes throughout my entire adolescence. I didn't get a proper computer of my own until right at the ass end of high school for me, so this would have been about 2014, which is when I bought, like, the Half-Life Complete Pack from Steam, and, I didn't play Half-Life 1 until a good 6 or 7 years after I played Half-Life 2, which doesn't skew things too badly. You can really pick up 2 not knowing shit about 1. It helps. I've always been one of those people that's like a fiend for lore, so I like looked up what happened in the first Half-Life, so I wasn't out of the loop. But that
Yeah.
didn't take away from the experience of playing it years later. I thoroughly enjoyed it even then. Uh, I played it in 2014, so that would have been like 16 years after release. Still loved it. Still great.
Yeah, the orange box is it's almost an incredibly singular thing because
Yeah.
nobody's ever really done anything like it before, and I don't think anything's ever gonna be the same as
Oh
that.
yeah.
I that was how I got my Steam account back in the year of our Lord 2010. Was I went to
Mhm.
Best Buy and I begged my mom to buy me a copy of the Orange Box on PC, and I had like the shittiest computer of all time,
Yeah.
and it like barely ran at all.
See, I got my
But
copy on Xbox, and I got it brand new, sealed off the shelf for 20 fucking dollars.
I
It,
have
it
I have
was
I have I have so many beautiful memories of playing bot matches of Dust Bowl on TF2 in
mhm,
fifth grade. That shit was it was beautiful.
mhm. Portal was really what just blew my mind back then. It was scary, it was challenging, it was very the ominous atmosphere of it. It really shook me as a kid, and I loved it. And I wish Valve still made games.
I wish
I wish.
that's another question I have later.
Oh yeah, we'll
Uh,
talk all about it.
but yeah, I mean Portal is a whole other thing we could talk about. But we're
Absolutely.
here to
It's
talk
tied
about
into
Half-Life.
Half-Life, but we're here for this.
And I also it took me a while to play the first Half-Life as well. I think I like you, I played the second before the first. But yeah, let's to dive deeper into this game. Let's talk about where you start. Let's talk about the opening tram ride, which is how
Oh
this game
boy.
starts.
Real-time like elevator sequences and stuff like that have always been like the bane of gaming existence, but this a lot of people like to shit on the opening of Half-Life because just to talk about it to start, you kind of like come to like the screen opens up from black, you get your little text overlay, Gordon Freeman, 17, MIT graduate, blah blah blah. Um But with that said, that gives you so much information, you're riding this tram through the caverns and,
Yeah,
like,
it gives you
mesas,
enough.
and it shows you the environment, and it also gives you a really good glimpse at, like, the big pneumatic robots walking around, the giant pools of nuclear waste with no railing around them, and, like,
Straight up, I'm kind of mad they never used the hydraulic robots in the rest
oh,
of the
yeah, that
game.
would've
That
been
would have been
awesome.
awesome.
But, like, it does a really good job of showing you this is Black Mesa, it is sprawling, it is massive, it is kind of secure, and it is operating on cardboard and exposed wire and bullshit. This is a place of science, but it's not a place of peace or safety, I think is what the opening gives you a really good physical look at. And why I say, I said people shit on it because, it takes forever. There's like 9, 10 loading screens. All of this just to get you to a door you still have to wait for a security guard to open. But the thing is, with that opening being so long, you look at something like Wolfenstein, the opening is get psyched, and now you're standing in a hallway with a gun. You look at Doom, you're standing in a hallway with a gun. You play Quake, you're standing in a hallway with a gun. Half-Life was kind of the first. It's a first in a lot of ways to do the first of a lot of things, But the first of those firsts was, oh hey, there's plot. And it's engaging, and it tells you who you are, where you stand. And that's not to say Quake and Doom and Wolfenstein don't have plots, but that was all in the manual. If you
Yeah,
didn't
there's a
read the
plot you have to
manual,
read.
you wouldn't know that the Doom guy assaulted his commanding officer for telling him to fire on civilians and put him in a full body cast unless you read the manual. Unless you read the manual, you just start out at Doom's Gate, shotgun blasting imps. Half-Life took a more deliberate, slow approach, and it really eases you into the world and into Black Mesa and gives you a lot of time to like ruminate on what's going on here. And I think a lot of people don't see that, and all they see is, oh god, I'm still not playing the game. But it was a first, is how I'll phrase that. But that's yeah, it does take a considerable amount of time, and once you get off the tram, you still have to wait for a security guard to open the door.
Yeah,
uh,
and it also it does a couple things. Number one, it introduces the idea of you never leave Gordon's shoes the whole game.
Precisely.
There's never a cutscene where control is taken away from the player. If there's a dialogue scene, basically you're trapped in a room with whoever you're talking to, and you can just run around and do whatever you want.
Absolutely.
Uh, and also the part of that I like the intro Tram ride. I think it does a lot of good world building immediately. It just gets you invested in the world of the game instead of just being like a little shooting gallery for you to run around or you don't really care. Uh, but and specifically about that little NPC that walks over to the door, I think that's part of that is training the player to be like, hey, sometimes NPCs will be needed to progress in the
Oh,
game.
absolutely. Yeah. There's, I imagine there's plenty of people out there that don't give a shit about the plot of any game and just kill every scientist and security guard they see. And don't get me wrong, I do it once in a while just because it's funny. But like, I can't imagine how many people like shot a security guard and are like, well, fuck, what do I do now? You know?
Yeah, and I mean, have you played Black Mesa, the remake of this game?
No, I've not. I've played all the expansions. I haven't played Decay or Black Mesa, and I certainly haven't played Hunt Down the Freeman.
It's good. It's gonna be. I'll have some stuff to chime in about Black Mesa because Black
Oh yeah,
Mesa
please do. I've
is really really good.
always wanted to play it. I just don't think my computer can handle it.
Especially when we get to talking about Zen and they make a lot of changes to Zen in Black Mesa to make it
I'm sure
better.
that's probably not a
Uh,
bad thing. Yeah.
and speaking of Gordon, we're gonna I'm gonna circle back around to the impact this game has had later when we're done talking about most of it. But let's talk about Gordon for the time being.
Sure.
Do you like Gordon as a silent protagonist? Do you think that I guess Valve maybe do you think that maybe Valve wrote themselves into a corner as they sort of started with Half-Life 2 having a lot more story focused stuff? And just, do you like Gordon in general?
Well, to answer your first part about the later plot stuff, I don't necessarily think that cornered themselves with that solely from the plot armor that, and I guess this goes without saying that there's going to be spoilers for the entire series. But at the end of this game, Gordon is essentially put in stasis for 20 years while the Earth is invaded by new aliens that start a fascist regime and start fucking with humanity. And he's kind of dropped into the center all of this 20 years later. So, I mean, with Gordon having been silent throughout the entire first game, they didn't really have a lot of quote unquote character to build off of, I guess. And with the events that transpire in the second game, Gordon's kind of like already a legendary figure for what he did in Black Mesa. He's like a Jesus figure to this resistance that's cropped up. And I don't necessarily think they wrote themselves into a corner simply because like Gordon has always been in no uncertain terms, literally just a vessel for the player to inhabit. You are Gordon. You know what I mean? Like, there isn't much to get wrong. He simply exists. They didn't tell us anything about him, so your brain is free to run wild. Literally, all we know about him is his age, his credentials, and he's got a photo of a baby in his locker. Is it his baby? I don't know. Could be. Could be his sister's baby. Maybe he has a sister. I don't know. Your brain can run wild.
Again, I'm gonna end up keep talking about the impact this game has had. Uh, I feel like specifically it was this game that basically created the whole idea of silent first-person shooter protagonists. Obviously, they
For
were
sure.
in the past but a lot of the time that was before the era of voice acting. Uh, But just the idea of having a blank slate canvas to just project yourself into and be like, "Hey, I'm in this game world," as a way for the player to interact with the world. I think that was Half-Life in particular was the one that really kicked that stuff off.
I think giving Gordon any kind of like we're talking about like changing characterization or anything as the game went on would have been a huge mistake because there is no characterization to muddle with as long as you keep him a vessel for the player. I think he works great. People like to cite Master Chief as a silent antagonist, which is erroneous and wrong.
I
He
mean,
talks
he
he
talks a
talks
lot in
all
the
the
cutscenes.
fucking time. Most of what he says is we have to get Cortana, or I'm really sad that Cortana isn't here. But at
I
the you
love
know
my
he
blue big titty computer wife.
people like to erroneously not only call him silent, but like an unfeeling protagonist. But Master Chief is probably one of the feelsiest dudes out there. And it's nitpicky, I guess, but Doom Guy even grunts and "Mm," in the first game, and he has a few voice lines in Eternal, so it's not fair to call him a silent protagonist either. Even Quake Guy hums when he jumps. That's Trent Reznor's voice doing the jump, by the way. But all of these characters were quote unquote silent protagonists. Gordon is still a silent protagonist. I think he does also have a few like pain grunt sound effects, but like the whole point, I think, is to give you literally just a window into this world to experience these experiences. And I'm very glad that they've kept Gordon silent all these years. They haven't all the other characters are the characters. Gordon is a window. That's how I've always seen it, and I'm glad that with all the choices, because to be honest with you, Half-Life 2 is a radically different game. It's
In a lot of
expanded.
ways, yeah.
It's an evolution, another recomposition of the formula that Half-Life 1 worked out so well. But they easily, like you said, with all of the plot and the developments that happen into that elevate Gordon to like the status he's at within the Resistance as an antagonist of the Combine, they could have easily dropped the ball and like had him give some speech or something. And so, in a roundabout way to answer your question, I love that Gordon is a silent protagonist, and I would go so far as to call him the silent protagonist, especially relatively speaking with other quote unquote silent protagonists.
Yeah, there's a really really great video essay by one of my favorite YouTubers who is Noah Caldwell Gervais. He basically went through the whole. He talks about all the games. I'll put a link in the description of the episode so people can watch it because I love him. I love Noah Caldwell Gervais so much. But he has a little line at the beginning when he talks about this game where basically the player wears Gordon like Gordon wears glasses.
Yeah.
It's at some points, especially in Half-Life 2, I feel like there are points where it might have been like the dialogue, the scenes would have been better if Gordon could respond, but at the same time, I feel like if he did, it would be really weird and it wouldn't really feel like Half-Life.
Yeah, I especially like there's a joke very early in Half-Life 2 where you have to throw a switch to start a teleporter and Barney says, "Hey, really putting that MIT education to work." And I just love the idea of Gordon just staring him stone-faced, silent, like not even reacting to the joke in the slightest. Just
It's awesome.
it's great.
You talked about how Half-Life 2 is a very, very different game compared to the original, and we're not talking about
Mhm,
Half-Life 2. This is not the episode about Half-Life 2. But that sort of uh, allows me to transition into the next question that I have, which is
mhm.
about the gameplay. Half-Life 1 is very, very indebted to Quake, which is
Oh
I think
yeah,
both of us have talked about not just in our personal conversations. We both really, really love Quake.
huge
Uh,
fan.
Specifically the original. I haven't played any of the other ones because none
Mhm.
of them have the same vibe as the first Quake. Uh, that's sort of very weird. It's like the first game before Bloodborne, which we will talk about next week, to really get Eldritch stuff
Yeah, very gothic,
right
very
and
eldritch.
done well. But I guess the next question is, what are your sort of thoughts on that minute to minute gameplay? Do you think the gunplay is just like another version of Quake, or do you think it has enough of its own ideas to sort of evolve beyond that game?
It's a very, energetic game. The fights, they're not exactly, like, quick and over. There's a lot of them that incorporate, like, puzzle elements almost, where you've got all these crates maybe in a warehouse, and you've got soldiers strategically placed around those crates. You can use explosives to clear the crates out. You can get through them with a crowbar. It's very engaging, and like you said, it's minute to minute. It's always changing. You need to use different weapons for different situations with different enemies. And I think it does stand out considerably from Quake. I played a lot of Quake after they remastered it last year, Uh, I bought the fucking vinyl re-release of the
It's
soundtrack
so
that
good.
Nine
It's such
Inch
a good
Nails put
game.
out. It's amazing. I love Quake so much. It bestills my little Reznor cult heart. But Quake is a very different beast. As many similarities as these share, the motivations for the characters are completely different. As similar as the gameplay is, because of the things that arise from sharing that kind of engine. I think what separates and delineates the two very, very clearly is the atmosphere. The weaponry in Quake is very, I'm not even sure how to describe it because a lot of the weapons aren't inherently eldritch. They're very industrial, I guess is the right word for it. You've got like the double barrel, you've got your standard nail gun, you've got like the quadruple barrel nail gun, of course your classic video game double barreled shotgun. But it's all very of its environment. All Most of the weaponry in Half-Life is very realistic. You've got you got the handgun. Depending on what graphics pack you're using, the machine gun changes. It can be like an MP5, but it can also be like an AR style thing. Your
I
cl
love the way that the guns look in the original Half-Life without the
Yeah,
fanciful
yeah.
texture pack, where
No, I always turn
all
that
the
off,
guns are
yeah,
made of like 8 polygons.
for sure. The pistol has a nice satisfying snap to it. The shotgun, you've got and a really big deal that separates it from Quake as well are the alternate fires on these things. You've got like semi-auto and full auto depending on what trigger you're pressing. You can fire 2 shells out of the shotgun if you press the alternate fire. The rocket launcher has a homing mode. That's a huge, huge delineation, is just the virtue of having those alternate fires. But they're not also as fanciful as the Quake guns. Of course, Quake has, nail guns and stuff like that, and that's not to say Half-Life doesn't have goofier stuff like the bugs and the Tau cannon, but a lot of the weapons are more rooted in realism, and I think that also helps with, like, inhabiting Gordon. I think
Yeah,
that's a pretty roundabout answer.
I mean, I feel like it is the combat of this game is pretty fast paced. I feel like that eventually pace of combat in these games gets slower and slower until you reach something like Half-Life Alyx, where it's a VR game and you have to
Which I
move
still haven't
around
played,
in
by the
real
way.
life. Half-Life Alyx is so good. Well, I have a question about that later.
Sure, sure.
Uh, but yeah, it's gonna be weird to say because this is a game that has like a glue-on gun where it's basically the proton pack from Ghostbusters and there's like aliens and shit. But this is basically like the more grounded version of Quake in
Yeah,
that
definitely.
there is it's a little slower and a little more methodical, but it's still frenetic enough to where combat engagements feel snappy. And
Yeah.
I think it's sort of yeah, I agree with you. It stands on its own.
I would say
Uh,
that the weapons are less fantastical than Quake, I think is a good way to phrase it.
yes, there's no nail gun in Half Life.
Even the goofier stuff makes sense in like a sci-fi perspective.
Yeah, it's
If
they're
you
all
look
they're
at it
because they're all like
like a horror B movie from the 50s, it's all very science.
yeah. Let's sort of go on and let's continue to sort of talk about gameplay. This question is sort of do you think the gameplay or the story is more important in this game? Like, which do you
It,
value more?
in this specific gameplay, absolutely. The story is very cut and dry and dare say predictable. Uh you fucked up an experiment, now aliens are here. You killed a lot of aliens, now soldiers are here. You killed a lot of soldiers, now black ops are here. You killed everybody, and now you're gone. It's very cut and dry. And that's not an insult, and that's not me talking down on the game, but that's just simply the facts. It's very, very, I don't want to say bare bones because I don't think it is bare bones. I think cut and dry is a little better. I think it's just very formulaic, and the
It,
gameplay is what really makes it stand out from that kind of generic story.
the story is sort of almost in the background in this game. Obviously,
Mhm.
it crops up more at the end,
Yeah, it
but
slowly becomes relevant, the story.
yeah, but it's not as as essential to the story as something like Half Life Two.
Exactly,
But
yeah. The
there's
majority of the
almost
story in Half-Life is get out. Just get the fuck out.
there's almost a layer of it that reminds me of this game came out, as we said before. This game came out in 1998, and part of me thinks it was almost influenced by the sort of wave of disaster movies that came out around the mid to late 90s.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
your Deep Impacts or your Dante's Peaks or your Twisters or shit like that.
Half-Life the
Uh,
movie directed by Roland Emmerich.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that in my mind's eye. It probably wouldn't be good, but
Not at
it
all.
would make at least a modicum of sense. So, there is that sort of late 90s disaster movie type feel where it's like the
Yeah,
pace doesn't really stop. You're
I've
just
always
constantly
gotten
going, going, going.
I've always gotten an Alien vibe from the game too, with all the hallway creeping and the jump scares and stuff like that. I've always gotten very distinctly a 1979 Alien vibe from the game.
Mm. Yeah, especially when you get into Zen. But that's almost the next question. The actual next question is: do you like the story of this game? Do you wish there was more to it, or do you like sort of that more bare bones style?
I can't say I dislike it. I do like it. I don't think there's anything that could expand, quote unquote, on it that Opposing Force and Blue Shift, the expansion packs that came out that Gearbox did after the fact. Um, I don't think there's anything I can ask for that those two expansions didn't give us specifically. I like it for what it is. And like I said earlier, I'm not talking down on it. It's just simply how it is with this game. But no, I don't think there's anything specifically that wasn't added after the fact that would improve it per se.
Yeah. I mean, like we just said earlier, it's the story is mostly background stuff, but what is there, I think, is really really impactful. There's a specific moment I want to talk about in Black Mesa,
Mhm.
in what I would say is probably one of my favorite chapters of the game, Office Complex, where you're running around and there's a little radio you can find that basically just plays like it's basically just a radio announcer, basically sort of talking about, just giving you a little brief glimpse into what's going on outside of Black Mesa, where it's like we're evacuating the nearby area. Bring don't try to bring a whole lot of stuff with you, food, water, blah 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 blah. It's just that little bit. I think adds a lot to the story, and I think it's one of the many things that makes Black Mesa work.
At 9:47 a.m. Mountain Time, a disaster of unknown type has occurred at the Black Mesa Research Facility, causing significant damage and failure to various power and communication systems in the surrounding areas. An immediate evacuation order has been issued for all residents within a 75-mile radius of the facility, and on-site military has been dispatched to provide assistance. Make sure to bring an emergency supply of food, water, clothing, first aid kit, flashlights with extra batteries, and battery-powered radios. Follow local evacuation routes, which have been marked by local authorities, and only use one vehicle. Do not return to the warning area until the all clear has been given. If you are not in the evacuation zone, stay where you are. If you are within the evacuation area and have no transportation, locate your nearest police department or military officer. Do not use telephones or cell phones, except in the case of emergencies. Stay tuned to local news media outlets for further details and information on this situation.
Black Mesa is in many ways a sort of a different game than the original. It's more in line with Half-Life 2 than it is with Quake. So there is something a little bit lost there in that transition. But it does make a lot of changes that I think are good, especially when we get to the next area that we're going to talk about, which is Zen. So right at the end of the game, you're basically, as Alex talked about in his little recap earlier, you're given basically you get to the Lambda complex. The scientists are like, if we have to stop this invasion, you have to go to this alternate dimension or whatever, this alien planet, and you jump through this portal and you're dropped into this horrific land of floating platforms and just a lot of 3D platforming in
Yeah,
first person.
low gravity and these like spiked tentacle things that are rooted in the ground that'll totally fuck you up if you get too close to them.
And you're given this item, I think it's the long jump pack or like the double
Long jump
jump
module, yeah,
long jump module, yes. So you jump like your Mario and Mario 64,
yeah,
uh,
absolutely, Luigi style.
Luigi style. Uh, do you think that Zen is well designed? How do you sort of feel about those platforming elements?
It is a great game. I can't call Half-Life a perfect game because there are a lot of, little bugs that stick out as great and as formative and as foundational as it is. Zen is probably my least favorite part of the game, and I know a lot of people can sympathize with that.
Yeah.
That's not to say it's all total dog shit, but it just kind of it works against the good stuff that the game gave you so far. I don't hate the idea of Zen. I really love the idea of Gordon going from point A in the facility to having to do this mission in the other world to it's a great story arc, don't get me wrong. I just think that maybe it should have conceptualized a little more. Maybe it should have spent a little more time in the oven. Uh, a lot of it is the gravity, and the game is a great mixture of a lot of different things. It's a horror game, it's a sci-fi game, it's a shooter. But all of a sudden, it's been a puzzle game the entire game, but this is where it really goes head over heels into becoming mostly a puzzle game with the jumping puzzles and trying to free these little crystal things out of like a little, you know what I mean, little triangles that float around, and you have to jump around and smash the things. It kind of loses focus when you hit Zen, and it all comes back into like sharp focus at the very, very end of the game once you've beaten it. And I think that's detrimental, but I don't think it's a deal breaker.
Yeah, it's definitely not great, and specifically also the final boss of the game, the Nihilith. He sucks. He's
just
like not fun at all.
Yeah.
His whole thing is that he flies around. He's a big floating brain guy.
Yeah, there's these little like baby looking enemies that float around and shoot shit at you. He's like a big one of those.
Yeah, he shoots energy projectiles at you, and it's basically a giant cylinder you fight him in. There are little jump pads. You jump on top of it. Basically the goal is to jump really high up and then shoot him with like grenades in his exposed brain hole. But the worst part about that boss fight is that he keeps throwing portals at you and sending you into little platforming challenges where you have to escape, and then you get out, and then he immediately hits you with another portal, and you have to keep doing that. So I think last time I played through this game, I just said fuck it and turned on cheats and went to no clip and just started gunning him down.
Yeah. There's literally like, okay, this is like nitpicking lore bullshit, but for all that effort of portaling you away every time, he could easily just pick you up and rip you in half and be done. But he wants to put you through puzzle hell.
He just does it to fuck with you. Just to again talk about Black Mesa. Black Mesa basically for a while when it was in early access, the game stopped once you jumped through the portal to Zen. Like the game ended there because they had put in a lot of work to try and make a new version of Zen. Basically, Zen in Black Mesa is entirely redesigned. Basically, nothing is kept from the original except for like the main story beats. If you fight the Gonarch, you fight Nihilith, and all this other stuff. You have the same basic plot beats, but everything is either expanded or completely changed to make it tolerable. There's not a lot of platforming. There's lots of really interesting alien landscapes. Zen in Black Mesa is actually fun, and it's kind of insane. The thing that it reminds me the most of is my favorite game of all time, BioShock, where basically in the last third that game completely shits the bed and like doesn't know how to end. So it's like do a little escort quest and then fight a giant boss man. The game's over now. It reminds me a lot in that way where you get to Zen and it's like platforming, run around.
That's what the kids love.
Fight a big alien guy, get teleported. Game's over. But the ending of a Half-Life, unlike the ending of BioShock 1, is really, really great. And it also allows me to transition into my next question, which is about our good friend, the G-Man. I'm going to immediately say it right now. G-Man is probably my favorite antagonist in any game.
Yeah, that's a good one, yeah.
I just love the idea of this weird alien guy who is just chosen the form of a businessman
he delights in his work. He relishes it.
And the whole point of it is we don't know what his work is. It's
on the surface, like as surface level as it gets, he appears to be some kind of middleman for securing agents of some kind to further the goals of his superiors, I guess is the most straightforward way to put it.
Yeah, my question is, who do you think the G-Man works for, essentially?
Wow, that is the subject of many a gamer debate. Um, he clearly isn't in league with the Combine per se because he, plucks you out of the fray to combat them and to take back humanity from the Combine. So you can maybe scratch that one off the list. Uh, he doesn't seem to have any alliance with like the Nihilant or the Gonarch or any of like the Vortigaunts or anything like the Vortigaunts are aware of who he is in Half-Life 2 and
The
they're like
Vortigaunts seem to be
wary
his
of him.
enemy,
They're
essentially.
they're very very wary of him. But they are inherently familiar with him. They make that clear. Um to be completely fucking honest, I have no inkling who or what he could be working for. I've always kind of seen him as maybe like a he does make direct references to like employers. So he's not a rogue free agent, but I've always thought that whoever he's working for, he does maybe seem to have his own ulterior motives in mind, like he's maybe trying to get shit done behind their backs, the way he talks and phrases things and the big answer here is I have no fucking clue.
Yeah,
Uh
that's the thing that interests me the most about him is that he's not just a mouthpiece for his employers. He has his
yeah.
own agenda, like shit that he wants done. Specifically, when we get to Half-Life 2, I think episode 2, when he like has a personal grudge against like Eli.
Yeah.
And have you been spoiled on Alex? Do you know what happens in that game?
I do, yes.
Okay.
My brother has a VR setup. He told me all about it. It sounds great.
With like the shit that he pulls in Alex, where he like knows what's going to happen, even though that game's a prequel, and like swaps things around and changes the whole entire storyline of that game.
Mhm.
It's He's just such a fascinating character, and
He's
I
clearly
mean,
up to something on a personal level.
he's very devilish. He's going devil mode.
Oh, for
He's
sure.
got he's got some nefarious plans. Michael Shapiro is his voice actor, and he is fucking incredible. There's like I don't know, like 5 minutes of total G-Man content where he speaks in the entire series.
But it's very
Uh,
iconic. Pretty much everything he says is iconic.
it's fantastic, and
I I'm unable to separate the expression fuck, wake up and smell the ashes from him. The wake
yeah,
up and
wake up.
smell anything. I hear it in his
Yeah,
voice.
it's incredible. I just love that there's just the idea of a funny businessman who works for evil aliens.
Oh.
Just such an interesting concept, and I think
Speaking of the G-Man, I have to relay this personal experience. It's the funniest one of the funniest fucking things that ever happened to me in the world of playing video games. Really early on, I had Half-Life 2 on a PC, maybe in high school. It ran really shitty. Um, but one time when I tried to boot it up, the beginning of Half-Life 2, and I know we're not going to talk too much about 2, but the intro of 2 is G-Man narration over like images from the first game, like the resonance cascade and stuff like that. Just, shots of the lasers and everything. He's supposed to be talking with his face overlaid on it, but one of the times I booted the game up, his face was completely still and it wasn't playing his dialogue, so he's just looking into the camera at you as like the droning score plays and all these images flash by. I've never had it happen again, but it was fucking terrifying. And I love the idea of that being someone's first playthrough. It's just G-Man staring at you while the wah, whir, clang, just
be fucked up.
fucking hilarious.
Yeah, I can't. I've talked about it a lot because I also do some video game live streaming. I played through all of Half-Life 2, uh, and I love G-Man. He's great. Let's go on and talk about we mentioned earlier the expansion packs that you've
Yes,
played.
yes.
Let's talk about those.
Yeah,
Blue Shift and Opposing Force. What are your
right.
thoughts on those?
I like Blue Shift a lot. Opposing Force came out in '99. Blue Shift came out in 2001. Both of which developed by Gearbox Software. Another famous gamer company.
Blue
Um,
Shift, I think, was originally supposed to be an add-on for the Dreamcast port of Half-Life 1 that never came out.
that sounds right. Yeah. They're interesting. Blue Shift, you play as Barney Calhoun, who is a pretty major character in Half-Life 2. It's just another trying to get out story, but it's more focused on the scientist and security guard side of things.
It's very
Uh,
short too. Like it's not
very,
very long.
very short, just a few levels. An opposing force, he plays Adrian Shepard, who is one of the HECU HECU units sent in to essentially contain this situation. And you get kind of he has to also fight a bunch of aliens and shit. Uh, it's they try to put you in his shoes. They try to paint him as kind of a sympathetic character. I don't remember specifically if he's like, "Oh, I don't want to kill scientists" or anything like that. Um, it's not insanely memorable to me, opposing force. I like Blue Shift a lot, as short as it is. Maybe that has something to do with playing as like an established franchise character, because they just do nothing with Shepard after opposing force. They literally he's like status question mark at the end of the game. I
Yeah,
keep thinking,
G-Man puts him in a freezer. It's like, all right, bye.
and they did something with Gordon later, and they've done stuff with Barney later, and a lot of people are like, oh, are we ever going to get more Shepard stuff? People interpreted like stuff in Portal to be like halfway references to that. The Portal gun is called the Aperture Science Handheld Portal Device, which is
Mhm.
ASHPD, which almost looks like A Shepard. Oh, what could it mean? It means nothing.
Whoa.
It means absolutely nothing, and we're not getting an opposing force sequel.
Yeah, it's very interesting because if you've, I'm gonna put another link in the description of another YouTube video. If you've watched the No Clip documentary about Half-Life, uh, Gearbox and Valve have a sort of very strained relationship almost, because Randy Pitchford is an asshole.
Hmm.
Uh, and it kind of makes sense that they wouldn't really want to do anything with that. And also, Opposing Force does this really weird thing where they just add in an entirely new alien race called, I think, Race X. And you
Yeah,
just had to fight them, and there's a whole different giant monster you fight at the end of Opposing Force. And then they
it's
just never
very
talk about them ever
derivative.
again for the rest of the game.
Very derivative. Not and frankly just not as interesting as the original game or Blue Shift.
Uh, but Opposing Force does have that grappling hook barnacle, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's maybe the one fun takeaway from it, I guess. I'm not harsh on the game. It is a fun Half-Life experience. It's just not my preferred cup of tea.
No, it's not nearly as good as the base game. And Blue Shift, it gets a pass because it's short.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
I'd say it's a lot of fun too. I think you get a stronger security guard pistol in that game, if I'm remembering correctly.
I
That's a
don't
lot of fun to
remember.
use. It's pretty
Uh,
neat. I enjoy it for what it is, a little short slice of another one of Freeman's compatriots.
and briefly, just to mention it before we move on, there is Half-Life Decay, which is, I think, was originally for the PlayStation 2 release of this game.
Yes.
Uh, it is a multiplayer mode. Neither of us have played it.
Nope.
I've heard it's not great, uh, because not a lot of the challenges are designed for two players. It just sort of feels like a lot of running around, and it doesn't really take as much advantage of the co-op stuff, especially compared to Valve's other co-op things like Left 4 Dead or Portal 2. It's just not super great. And also, trying to play it on a computer in the year of our Lord 2022 is apparently a giant pain in the ass.
Yeah, Decay just sounds like a lot of missed potential to me.
Yeah, it's interesting because it adds extra characters, like I think Gina Cross, who created the HEV suits, and
That's
it adds interesting stuff, but at the same time, it's like not very essential.
that almost feels like Star Wars level stuff to me. Like something must exist, so we need to hear about the history of it and who invented it and why. And it's an HEV suit. It speaks for itself. We don't need to know
I
who invented the HEV suit.
I think her model is actually based on the hologram who shows you how to use it in the training mode of the original game. So it has some basis in reality.
I suppose. It
Uh,
like I said, it just comes across as like, oh, Han Solo got his ship, his gun, and his dog all in a week. You know what I mean?
wow.
What do we know? Half? Oh, we know HEV suit. We need to know who made that. We need to know who brought the crowbar from Home Depot to Black Mesa.
Yeah, I think at the end of Decay, yeah, you deliver the sample that Gordon pushes into the thing. It
Oh, the
does. You're
shopping cart full of glowing rocks.
now that you're talking about it, it does in fact sound like a Star Wars prequel. So yeah.
Hmm. Here's what we
Um,
know. Here's how we get there. Is how they wrote it, I guess.
I guess, yeah. All I can think of is Solo, a Star Wars story now.
Gordon Solo, because he's
What
by
is the name of
himself.
your people?
Just
I have
blank
no
stare.
people.
Gordon silence.
Uh, we kind of already talked about this, but what do you think is the weakest aspect of the game?
You could say the plot easily. Sometimes the difficulty spikes are a bit much, especially on the hardest difficulty, but that's not super fair to say either, because a lot of times when I die in the game, I feel like it is my fault. Like they lay out pretty clearly like the strengths and weaknesses of everything. Um, I guess to a fault, the plot is a bit weak. Again, not an insult, just a weakness. And Zen is just a lot of not fun to play. That almost feels like a cop out answer, but it also is pretty true.
Yeah, Zen. I was immediately going to say Zen. You know, some people don't like On a Rail, and I'm like, On a Rail's not that bad.
Monorail's
Uh,
fine. You're
on a-
honestly not on the cart that long.
no, and I mean it's not hard to control, and it's not really all that confusing. It's just you're literally on a rail.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, Zen is and the final boss in particular suck.
Yeah.
Uh, on the flip side, what do you think is the strongest aspect of this game?
Personally speaking, this might not be an answer you hear a lot, but one of the huge strengths of this game that it has over a lot of games is its soundtrack and its score. Uh, I love listening to it. A lot of it's ambient, but a lot of it is also funky as shit. There's a lot of I feel like there's some like a little house influence on it. It's very it's unlike a lot of other game soundtracks. To bring up Quake again, Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails did the score for that, and it's a very screamy, very drum poundy, very like blood pumping fighting actions, music. But a lot of the Half-Life score is, very muted, a lot of like hi-hat cymbals, a lot of electric guitar drone, but at the same time a lot of like cave drip type stuff. Um
And
it's
even in Quake, there's like one song that's like that, but the rest of it is mostly just like dark ambient stuff.
yeah, like very like wavy synth, that kind of thing. Um Half-Life is all over the place in terms of the soundtrack, and I like it.
Yeah,
Um
I almost wanted to say earlier that it's basically like the Quake soundtrack, but like a dancier, more house inspired version of that.
Definitely, and I didn't really notice the house influence until I've actually been I listen to a lot of music at work, because I'm kind of secluded in what I call the frame cave. It's away from the floor. I get to be back
Mhm.
there all day, and I'll usually just listen to a shitty podcast or 9 out of 10 times Nine Inch Nails because they're my favorite band. But I've been listening to a lot of movie and game scores back there a lot, and Half Life has gotten a lot of rotation since I knew I was going to be talking about it on this show, and I love it. And I only just this year noticed that there's a lot of house influence on it.
Do you have a favorite song from the soundtrack?
It's pretty tied. I like oh fuck, what's it called? Nuclear something jam. Nuclear Mission Jam I like a lot, but I'm a human being with two ears and a heart, and like many people, my favorite song is probably Klaxon Beat. Uh it's great. The drone at the beginning is awesome, and when the hi hat kicks in, it straight up sounds like it could have been on Daft Punk's Homework. It's really really good shit. It's a really short song. It's like a minute and change, but there's of course like a 15-minute extended remix on YouTube. I love Klaxon Beat. Really good song. It's most people's favorite song from this game.
I think my favorite song is probably, it's the Valve theme now, but Hazardous Environments. I really
Oh yeah,
love that song.
it's good.
Uh and just the fact that they play it just that brief little snippet of it in Half-Life 2 when you put the HEV suit on, it's like, "Oh yeah."
hmm It's very yeah, like you said, it's become the Valve theme song, but it distinctly makes me think of Half-Life. It's very,
Meow.
very industrial, very slinky, very, very grimy sounding.
It's great.
It instantly brings to mind that shot of Gordon looking at his gloved hands in the suit. It's that's how you do a motif, I think.
Do you have a favorite what's your favorite chapter of the game? Do you have one?
Probably surface tension. Um,
Service Tension is very good.
It's probably the most engaging chapter, I think. It's the least focused on plot, and it's at the height of the get the fuck out of here part of the game. It's very tense, very, very run and gun. It lets you see a lot of the outside, which is kind of what you've been building out towards in this game. You spend a lot of it, in labs and ducts and hallways. This is the game that established crawling and ductwork, by the way. But yeah, no, surface tension I think is the most fun to play. Um, yeah, easily in my opinion.
Mine are probably, like I said, Office Complex or the one right after it. We've got Hostiles, where they
Those are
introduce
also very fun.
just because where they immediately introduce the Heku troops, and it's like, oh shit, now like it's really serious.
Yeah, I would say maybe Office Complex is my second favorite.
It's really very nice walking through these very 90s offices.
I love that first encounter with the Heku troops where the scientists are like, "Oh God, we're saved! Thank
We're
you!"
saved.
Oh.
They get gunned down. You're like,
Immediately,
oh shit,
and it just completely changes the tone of the game.
yeah, absolutely. The switch is immediately flipped when you get to where you've got Hostiles.
And you're like, "Oh fuck, not this
Oh
too."
fuck. Let's. I got a couple more questions. Mostly about the sort of this game's impact. How do you think this game's impact has been felt, like throughout the FPS genre? And
Oh,
as sort of a side of that, do you think this game has left a good legacy?
definitely a good legacy. I'll get to that in a second. But as far as like, how did you phrase the first part of it? What was the impact of it?
Yeah, like, do you think the impact of this game on the genre can still be felt?
For sure, 100%. Shooters are a lot different now. You look at stuff like, I don't know, Titanfall 2, Halo Infinite, stuff that's come out in the last, half of the decade, stuff that came out this year, last year. And it's a far cry from Half-Life. Half-Life is very no pun intended, it feels a little more on rails than a lot of newer games. Newer games, of course, have had more time to evolve and show you new mechanics and stuff, but there's something so beautifully simple about the first Half-Life. Like, you can use it as a blueprint for if you're trying to develop a shooter, you should absolutely be consulting Half-Life as your here's what you should be doing with your gunplay, with your physics, with your level design, with your pacing. Again, the last third of it isn't the best once you hit Zen, but in terms of impact, yeah, you can trace its DNA like at the roots of the FPS tree. Like, it's got Quake and Doom and Wolfenstein preceding it, but I think Half-Life is where the shift started into like legitimately enforcing FPSs as like a huge new like tower in the game pantheon. Platformer, it is a platformer, but platformers like Super Mario 64 and stuff like that, like, ruled in terms of the platformer. This is a shooter. It's a platformer. It's kind of survival horror. It kind of showed that a game can be more than just what the box says it is. It can be a few different genres of game. The impact absolutely has been felt and absolutely has lasted. Um, I think a lot of people prefer the second game. I'm a little weird, and I like this game a little more than Half-Life 2. Half-Life 2 is a great game. It's a lot of fun. You have a lot more freedom and movement in it. And that's kind of my point, is that the first Half-Life's a little restricted, and it kind of buckles you more into an experience. And I like that a lot. And a lot of games give you too much freedom, I think. Open world games have become more and more and more and more the norm these days. Fucking Halo is now open world, and it's a bit interesting, but there's a simplicity to Half-Life that has stood the test of time, and I think continues to stand the test of time and influence. It goes to show that a lot of man hours and talent and money went into a remaster, like a fan remaster, the way that Black Mesa did, just to show you what kind of community has built around this game and recognizes it for what it is.
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, my favorite game is BioShock, and BioShock is very obviously heavily inspired by a game like Half-Life. Silent protagonist, large selection of weaponry.
Eerie
It's
atmosphere.
eerie atmosphere. It's they're basically all for. There's sort of the idea of back in the '90s, when Wolfenstein and Doom came out, there was all these other first-person shooters that were coming out, and they were all labeled Doom clones because
Mhm.
they all had sort of similar gameplay of running around in a maze, getting keys and stuff. But it was Quake and this game that basically said, no, these are their own genre. This is not some kind of, they're not all rip-offs of the same game. This isn't like, when Pac-Man came out and there were like 30 different Pac-Man games. This is first-person shooters are their own thing and can do their own stuff. And also the idea of being able to tell a complete, rich story through just gameplay, that's also very, very influential on everything from, like I said, BioShock to stuff like the Fear games, fucking Call of Duty Modern Warfare would not exist without Half-Life 1. Basically every first-person shooter has at least a little bit of Half-Life 1 in it.
Yeah. I can't remember who said it. It was in a video essay, I know that for sure. But somebody once compared Doom to the discovery of fire and Half-Life to the harnessing of electricity, if that makes any kind of sense in terms of like
that's good.
Yeah, it's improving on the format, it's evolution. It is taking what existed previously and exploring all new kinds of nooks and crannies that couldn't have been considered in the old times. There's 5 fucking years between Doom and Half-Life, and the glow up, you could say, is just intensely phenomenal. It's
All of that due to Quake. Shout out Quake.
Shout out Quake.
Go play Quake.
We love you, Carmack.
Quake, the most underrated of the id games.
I think that's fair to say. Yeah.
It's still I'm still waiting on them to do like like a new reboot of Quake, like they did with Doom and Wolfenstein.
My God. You have no idea, man. If they got Trent Reznor to come back and record new music for that, I would legitimately piss my pants on the spot.
Get all that alien shit from 2 and 3 and 4. Get all that shit out of there. Make it a single player game that has multiplayer or whatever. Make it gothic. Make it industrial.
It's all there. You just the ideas are all there.
You could just do it.
It's what people have been clamoring for since Doom 2016, I think. A very small but vocal group of people like us in the Quake community.
The Quake community, and it's like 8 people.
QAnons, you could call us.
There's also another really big legacy that this game has, and that's modding. This was like this and like going back to Quake again, 2 big games that basically invented the modern modding scene.
Yeah, for sure. You had Doom WODs before that, but that was a very, very easy process compared to like modding as we know it now from this game.
Yeah, Team Fortress, which would eventually be absorbed into Valve. Counter-Strike, which is a massive game in and of itself. There's all sorts of really fun single-player mods for Half-Life 1. They're basically, I want to say, almost the entire PC gamer obsession with modding games. Like, every time a Bethesda game comes out, it's like, oh, I can't wait for the mods. I think a lot of that was based on the legacy of Half-Life, where like when people started porting in Quake mods to Half-Life, where you got like Action Half-Life and shit like that.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not the most experienced modder in the world, but I do know enough to know that this, like, beyond Doom WODs, this was probably the most, like, user-friendly way to edit a game, up to this point, anyway. Like, it wasn't super heard of at that point in time.
Like, again, tracking it back to a modern game, if you play, like, prop hunt mode in Fortnite, that wouldn't exist without Half-Life.
Mm-hmm.
Without the modding tools that were developed, and then later on in Half-Life 2 expanded upon, you get shit like Gary's mod and the original stuff that people made with that.
Hell, I would argue Gary's mod is maybe more influential than any Half-Life game.
Yeah, but again, Gary's mod wouldn't exist without Half-Life.
Precisely, yeah, absolutely. It's a testament to users having fun and going, how can I make this better myself? And it's a beautiful thing.
It's also a testament to Valve that they've been so supportive of this stuff. Where there's the Steam Workshop where you get to post all your stuff wherever you want. It's really easy.
You can say what you can and will about Valve, but at their core, they've always been very engaged with the community, in a good way, I should say.
It's not like Nintendo where they take down any fan game they say and destroy it with their laser beams.
You can still buy games from Valve from 20 years ago for a reasonable price. Checkmate, Nintendo.
They let Hunt Down the Freeman happen. Like
they sure did.
Like they let it happen, and while that game is shit, at the same time, they let fans take their IP and make a new game out of it and sell it on their platform, and they're like, yeah, sure, go ahead.
To relate that to my personal life, like I said, I work in framing. People bring me pictures of families, paintings, all kinds of weird shit, physical objects to mount. You can't predict what you're going to see in a day. And at the end of the day, the customer is quote unquote always right. I can put together, a lot of times people are like, oh, you give me your ideas, and I'm able to make something, with a pre-visualization that works with the piece. The matting is nice, the frame complements it. But then you get that 1 out of 10 customer that's like, this is exactly what I want, and it looks like dog shit, but I love it. I have to smile and I have to sell it to them because they're right. It's going to hang on their wall. Valve, that's pretty much what they did with Hunt Down the Freeman. They're like, well, it looks and smells like shit, but here you go. It's exactly what you what you wanted.
You do what you want, fellas.
We're gonna sit here and count the money.
I got I think 3 more questions.
Shoot.
The question was initially, have you played Half-Life Alyx, which you said you haven't.
I've not, despite being an Alex.
What do you think about the idea of the rest of the Half-Life franchise being VR exclusive games? Because I think that's the direction that they're going in.
I think it's inevitable. I don't think it's a great thing because, speaking as somebody that lives like kind of below the poverty line, I don't know when I'm going to own a VR headset. My brother does, but he works a lot more than me and is able to make more money than me, so he's able to afford stuff like that. Not a dig at him, and I don't feel jealousy over it, but that's just the fact. Some people can't afford this kind of thing. I'm one of those people, and like we've talked about. If you know me from the Spidey Signals show, you know that I am a disabled person. My hands are a little gnarled from arthritis. So using VR controllers isn't something that I terribly look forward to. I can pretty well use a standard like Xbox controller pretty well, but the idea of getting a little more intricate with like the triggers and wrist motions of VR isn't super appealing to me. Now that's a very specific individual case basis there, in my opinion, but I think that the money aspect of it can touch just about everybody.
Yeah, that opens a lot of really interesting questions. I do think VR is here to stay.
For sure. It's
I have a VR headset. I bought it so I could play Half-Life Alyx. Half-Life Alyx is the best
as
VR
did
game
my
ever
brother.
made. But Half-Life Alyx is easily the best VR game ever made. And if Valve are going to keep making stuff for VR, I'm like, fuck yeah. But you're right. The VR companies have to work through a lot of stuff because it's an entirely new way to play games. And I think it's really imperative that they, number one, obviously make it accessible to more people, both in, for people like you, making it more accessible for disabled people, and also making it more affordable. I think something like the Oculus Quest 2 is a good idea if it wasn't owned by the worst company in human history.
Absolutely.
But it's gonna be a long, slow march to ubiquity. And God forbid that we get dumbass shit like metaverse bullshit or fucking whatever. Like, I just want to play
the
Half-Life Alyx,
metaverse
dude.
Walmart, man.
I want to firebomb the metaverse Walmart.
I think there's a stronger chance of me getting a VR headset before the next Half-Life game comes out, because
Probably.
talking about all this, I distinctly remember when the Xbox One came out going, "Ah, shit, what if Half-Life 3 comes out and it's not on 360 and I have to buy an Xbox One?" That was like 10 years ago. So, I think realistically speaking, it's a catch-up process. You got to save up and get yourself a headset so you can participate in this. But I do think over time they're going to be more affordable. I think that, the Xbox and the PS5 have been out for about a year now, and they're not any more affordable. But that's very proprietary. There's more than one company that's capable of making VR. So I do think over time it will become the norm, and especially in Valve's little shared universe of stuff like Half-Life and Portal, it'll definitely become the norm. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it comes with a lot of caveats and eyebrow raises that aren't so easily answered in the year 2022.
I think that by the time Half-Life 3 comes out, it's because the thing that's excited me the most about Alyx, other than the fact that it's a really, really good VR game and basically is the game just that screams to people VR is the future, is that Valve cares about Half-Life. now again.
Yeah, they remembered it.
They're gonna just knowing for a fact they're gonna make Half-Life 3. It's like, oh my god.
I
Um,
still, I know it, and I don't believe it.
and
You know what I mean?
I do think that by the time that game comes out, VR is going to be in a very different place, and hopefully it will be more accessible to people, so that
Mhm.
whatever new technical leap forward that Half-Life 3 makes, more people will be able to experience it.
I'll be standing in line at the Metaverse GameStop with you to get it.
God, no, please, please, no.
It comes with with a Half-Life Alex Funko Pop, a digital one. What's not to love?
Is the metaverse even like a real thing? Like,
Yeah,
is
who
it
fucking
something
knows?
you can? Is it like a game that you buy? Is it like what are they trying to put? Is it a free thing that you down? What is it?
I am so happy to say I don't know.
Anyway, we're getting off topic. I got 2 more questions. Uh, what do you think Valve is going to do next? Because they're about to launch the Steam Deck, which is basically I don't want to call it a Nintendo Switch competitor because they're 2 very different things. They're just in the
Sure,
same form
yeah.
factor.
It's a Switch computer.
It's basically like one of those, handheld computer things that people have sold for a long time, but like Valve, so it's done really well.
Yeah.
What do you think is next on their radar?
Well, they've kind of, in a big way, they've been moving away from games for a bit. I mean, of course, they just put out Half-Life Alyx, but before that, there was a bit of a drought on their end as they were transitioning away from making the games to being the Steam guys.
Yeah,
Um,
being just the premier publisher for PC games.
and now with like the Steam Index and the Steam Deck, they are also like edging in on the proprietary physical console and dongle market. And I honestly can't predict what's going to happen next. I think there's a chance maybe they could be lining up. This is pure speculation. I haven't heard anything about this, but I like the idea of like a Steam Game Pass type thing. Um, Having access to like some classic Valve titles, maybe some stuff that rotates on a monthly or something like that basis. I think with all of the other services that are cropping up in that regard, it would be a smart move for Valve to do something like that. I do think that they are probably cooking up even more advancements for stuff like VR and the Steam Deck is probably one of the hottest items that's going to come out in the next couple years. Um, all in all, it's very very tricky to say what they're going to do next. Uh, I'm not anticipating Half-Life 3 anytime soon.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's
cry-
they're still working on like Source 2. Like
yeah.
they have a whole new game engine coming out.
If I had to take a stab in the dark wild guess, I'd say maybe they have some other new physical component in development we don't know anything about yet outside of their own proprietary VR and the deck. Uh, I would love for them to completely surprise us with something completely out of left field, like a new Team Fortress, a new Left for
Portal
Dead.
3.
And just count to any three. Fucking count to any three, and we'd be surprised and happy. Left 4
For
Dead
them
3,
to make
Portal
a
3.
major update to TF2, that'd be great.
Fuck, Half-Life 2 Episode 3. I don't even give a shit if it was that. That'd be great. Anything. Ricochet 3. Skip 2. Uh, that's a tough question to answer, but I think their most likely thing could be a new physical development or a Game Pass style subscription service for Steam. I think that would be really smart on their end.
It's gonna be interesting. I do have one more question before we go.
Of course.
How has Half-Life affected you? How has it made you think about games differently?
Well, that's a really good question. Like I've said a few times over the course of this, Half-Life kind of proved that you don't have to lock yourself into one idea. You think of something like Resident Evil, and yeah, it's a shooter, but it's survival horror, like cut and dry. That's what it is, right? Uh, Half-Life 2 is a shooter. It's survival horror. It's a puzzle game. It's an alien game. It's a soldier game. It's got it's a pizza with 12 different kinds of slices in the box, and all of them taste good. Uh, it in no short terms. That's just about the only way to phrase it. It proved you can be more than one thing, and that's really great because even fucking 24 years later from the release of this game, so many games are just one thing. Like, I don't mean to point fingers, but like Pokemon, like as a series, is so stagnant. It's the same thing over and over with a new gimmick every time, but there hasn't been a Pokemon game in a while that's drawn me. My girlfriend played a little bit of Arceus, I think, the new one, and it said it's fun, but it's not enough to make me go, yeah, I gotta fucking get that right now. Half-Life, it definitely left a mark, and I personally think it's not a perfect game. It's one of the best of all time. Its influence is felt far and wide, like a cinder block in the middle of a pond. Every first-person shooter you've played since '98, there's shades of Half-Life to it. Um, I think that retroactively speaking, it's going to be remembered pretty highly. Two might get a little more limelight, but it was so different and built on the foundation that its ancestors of Doom and Quake built for it. It built up on that so well that we're still talking about it a quarter of a century later, when most people just have it like hibernating in their Steam library because it was in a pack of the Valve Complete pack. A lot of people probably just pass right over it.
Yeah, this game goes on sale all the goddamn time. Buy it when you buy it. Just buy it. But play this game.
Maybe $1, maybe $2 for Half-Life. You don't even have to buy the expansion packs if you don't feel like it, or Source. Uh, you can play through this game in a couple of days, just chilling out and playing it. Like I said, I've been playing it for maybe a week. I'm maybe halfway there on the hardest difficulty of just playing through in my free time. It's not a super time consumer. You're not going to dump 100 hours into Half-Life. I think I've had these games on my computer for getting close to a decade. I've got 57 hours in Half-Life and 24 hours in Half-Life Source. So, I haven't spent all my time playing these games like I do with like New Vegas or Halo, but I've played it enough to where when I think about it, I can see it, I can hear it, and I can feel the atmosphere. And there's not a lot of games you can take that away from. Um, where just thinking about it puts you there. I think that it is a culmination of everything that came before it, and it is a beautiful specter of things to come that from the point of its release onward is the best way I can put it.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. You've summed it up really succinctly.
It's the rare game that has both historied ancestry and defining legacy. Not a lot of games have that.
And also it's one of those big landmark games that doesn't feel like homework to play it.
Oh yeah, despite it being a
It's
science game.
it's just really fun. Go outside and play it.
Yeah.
So Alex, we've reached the end of the program. This episode is kind of longer than I expected it to be. Usually these episodes are about an hour long. That's what I shoot
Mhm.
for. But there's just so much to talk about this game.
And it's us. We're in a tangent.
It's us. We're gonna if you listen to Spidey Signals, we tangent a lot. Our longest episode is almost 4 hours long.
Go listen to that too.
Go listen to our almost 4 hour long episode about No Way Home. Spoiler alert, good movie.
Pretty good. It's all right.
Pretty good. Do you have anything you want to plug or shout out, or any last words you want to say before we close it out here?
Not currently anything I need to plug. Look out for an EP from my band Spleen sometime in the next year.
Go
Outside
follow
of that,
Alex on Twitter and Tumblr and stuff, so you can
yeah,
keep up with his shenanigans.
I'm ArthriticJester on Twitter. I'm crooked-fingers on Tumblr. I'm just an internet man. I like goofs. I like music. Nothing specifically to plug. Just we've always got something cooking. We might do
Listen
some
to
more.
our podcast, Spidey
Yeah.
Signals.
Yeah, there's 2 whole seasons of that. If you like Spider-Man and you hate silence,
24 episodes, I think. We've made a lot.
give or take,
Uh,
yeah. But
yeah,
there's content to be consumed, and I'll be around to guest or co-host more shit with Lex in the future. I can guarantee you that.
it's always a pleasure to be here with you, Alex, and work with you.
Likewise.
But yeah, that's our show. Thanks for listening. Next week, we're going to have a new guest on. It's my very good friend Jordan, aka Coup Eater, and we're going to talk about the hit 2015 video game Bloodborne. That is going to be a wild ride. This is the first game I had to play for the show. Not the first game that I hadn't played yet before I started doing the show. And I have a lot to say. And the episode is actually going to come out after Elden Ring releases.
Ooh.
But we're going to record it before. So we will not have anything to say about Elden Ring. If you want to avoid spoilers for that, we won't have anything to say about that game yet because it won't even be out by the time we record it.
Good stuff.
But yeah, thank you for listening. Stay responsible. Bye-bye.
Hello, Gordon.
This is a Shutterball production.